As I was streaming Archeron yesterday, I got a lot of attention as I was looking at my 3v3 Arenas gameplay where I was playing as Grimball and I was getting my head kicked in multiple times while I was learning the ropes both of the character, that Eternal in Archeron, what my role was, what my team was doing, and how I could play better. This kind of unrestricted full look into what I was doing wrong and what I could do to improve was something that seemed to be a new concept to many people. And so this isn't going to be an Archeron video. This is going to be a broad overview on the general topic of learning from replays. Now, why should you learn from replays? Well, most people don't learn from replays. They learn the game when they first get into it by themselves or with the aid of a friend, and they have a baseline of skill they're bringing from other games. We can call that their legacy gaming skill. Because they have a beginner's mind, they ask questions that more intermediate players and some advanced and expert players don't ask anymore. And this, over the course of about a couple of weeks or a month, forms their initial impressions as to the game, the balance of the game, the balance of things inside of the game, their roles within the game, and how they can improve. Because that's the goal of getting all of these layers structured on top, is that they can understand how they can improve, how they can change their rank, how they can beat players that they weren't beating previously. So most people don't look at replays because they just want to practice. But their idea of practice is something that is frankly lacking. They want to play a lot of games. They think it's practice if they do the wrong thing, but they do it for another 100 hours. They think it's practice if they ask for advice from people that are about their level or just above their level, but they don't understand that that person, especially if they're extremely high level, has brought inside of themselves a multitude of concepts and of learning and of time and of self-reflection that can't quite be distilled and given to them as a new player. They'll go to coaching. Now, I think coaching is a wonderful place to go. Obviously, I got some from Bulby, from Archeron. Coaching is a good place to go if you don't even have a basis on which you can grasp the game itself, or if there is a part that you are mentally hung up on that maybe another person can guide you through that needle and get you through the spot of the block in your own mentality. But why replays? Well, I'm going to make the case that replays are just the best way to improve, the fastest way to improve, especially if you are looking at them either as a team, but especially as an individual. They are a way that you can instantaneously marry the idea of visualization, image training, affecting your memories, changing what your natural brain processes are in order to be something that's more efficient, more cerebral, and has more impact immediately and gets you more wins over other people. It cuts through the bullshit immediately because you're going to look at a replay and you're going to realize, now that I'm not in the frenetic pace of this PvP game where it feels like everything is moving at Mach 50 and I barely have my time to breathe, I have plenty of time here. I have multiple seconds to make the right move. I still made the wrong move. As you watch one replay, you'll notice that you're failing on a mechanical level. You have the wrong team concepts. Maybe your mentality for how you're approaching the practice or the game against that given opponent or playing with your team itself is just so fundamentally flawed that you never really could have won that game. And you can see that now with the benefit of hindsight. Another benefit of looking at these is that you understand you have much more time. The game is much more open and capable of being addressed than you think it is while you're in the hurry of just playing games. And this is something that just grinding thousands and thousands and thousands of games over hundreds of hours will not get you. And this is something that, because you are yourself looking at yourself, one benefit of a coach, yes, is that they can get you past the mental models and brick walls that you have set up for yourself. But a benefit of doing a replay analysis is that you change your perspective on yourself. And if you start doing this, you'll understand where your real level is. You'll stop thinking that you're being held back by teammates, you're being held back by the system, you're being held back by luck. And as you watch more of your replays, you will see trends and patterns emerge that will guide what you can do to fix those and improve yourself onto the next level. Now, I don't think everyone is correct in, let's say, the RTS space, especially. It's common knowledge and parlance to say, oh, everyone should do replay analysis. I fundamentally disagree with this. If you are a noob or a novice, in my estimation of the differentiation of player skills, right? You go noob, novice, intermediate, journeyman, advanced, expert, professional. If you are a noob or a novice, you have so few ideas as to what the game actually is. You don't have a broad enough concept to engage with the game or to grasp multiple major systems of the game, and you have a tenuous grasp on them at best, if you've even thought of them. And so you should be at an intermediate level or attempting to reach an intermediate level. If you're at the novice level reaching intermediate, or if you're at intermediate and you're trying to get to advanced and you're trying to get to journeyman, these things are the time when you should go get replay analysis, because you have enough systems in place, you have enough fundamental facts of the game under your command and under your control that you can start to manipulate them in your mind. They're like tetranemos in your head. You can spin them around a little bit. Whereas if you're a brand new player and you've never heard of this concept and you've never heard of that unit, you've never heard of this item, there's just too many facts coming at you all of the time. Your brain is struggling to process all of them on a slower thinking level. Once you start getting down to a more mechanistic and instinctual level, then you can benefit from coaching, because then you can take what the coach is saying and apply it to your game, because you realize the areas you weren't thinking about before that were kind of the natural pathways and concrescences of the river that your gameplay was taking you down. So we're going to get into how to analyze a replay. This is going to be across multiple genres. We're going to be talking about RTS games, FPS games. If you like Archeron, if you're coming from that, it's going to be arena games. And I've just seen this over decades and decades. So it's very simple, but there's a huge level of nuance into it. We're going to get into it. So the first part here, watch the whole replay. No, the whole replay. I know if you're on Twitch, you're watching people who are extremely skilled. They're the grandmasters of their various games, and they're not watching the entire game. They're going specifically to the point where they know they messed up. If you're watching a replay, you would benefit tremendously if you're trying to find out what is wrong and what you can fix, and you are at this intermediate level of breaking down everything that you're doing up to that point. In RTS games, they have this concept that you stop watching the replay after the first major mistake, because all of the latter mistakes compound, because that is an economic focused game or a game style. So if you don't win, or if you don't make a good trade, or if you fail to do something early, that has compounding effects, and it does what I call collapsing the game state. It makes it something that you can't watch anymore. If you're playing a hero shooter, if you're playing something like let's say that you didn't loot particularly well in Fortnite, or your team took really bad engagements and fights, and it just led to them trickling in one after another and dying repeatedly in a match of Overwatch. This same idea applies. You're going to watch the whole replay. Don't stop until at least the first major mistake that you personally made. Don't worry about your teammates. If it's a team game, your team is going to be different every single time, unless you are playing with a team, in which case every member of your team should still take the onus on themselves to see what they're doing. And then you're going to say what you did. This is something that I did on stream. You explain what you did at the time, because if you don't say it out loud, or if you don't take notes, or you don't extricate it from your inner monologue and send it out there, you won't realize what the flaw is. You won't realize that it sounds stupid. You won't realize that it was as bad an idea as it seemed. And once you do this, you also put distance from yourself as the person watching. You go from saying, that's me and I'm acting as if I'm playing the game right now, to, oh, this was past me. Past me made a mistake. Future me doesn't have to make that mistake, right? It gives you the freedom to grow and to breathe, and it takes you away from the inner monologue of the person who was playing the game in the replay, and puts the inner monologue back into yourself as the person who is going to make the change, on whom the onus is to change. And then you're going to have questions, right? Oh, why did I do that? Is a very common response when you're watching replays. And you should take that question very seriously. You will have a gut, visceral reaction, particularly if you're a gamer, in the sense that it's almost pejorative, where you really care about games. You want to play PvP, you want to grind, you want to get high rank, you care, you have aspirations in these games that other people don't seem to understand. You're not just doing this because it's fun and it's something you want to do on the side. If that's what you feel games are, that's totally fine, but this video is not for you. You don't necessarily have to go into your replays and go into your analyses, and in theory, you can have fun on whatever level you're currently on right now. But if you feel like you have some aspirations or some goals, and you say, oh, why did I do that? Oh, that was stupid, or something to this effect, then that feeling is the culmination of a series of unconscious thoughts that you're having as you send it out, and you need to make sure that those get verbalized. So here are some specific concepts that you can get into when you're watching a replay. There's 3 broad categories we're going to go into. So the first one is going to be concepts. Now, if you are a newer if you are starting to get to an intermediate level, most intermediate level players are in denial that they have any conceptual problems with the game whatsoever. I liken it to the idea, we'll talk about it later, that people lie about their brains in a way they would never lie about their bodies. So ask yourself right now, can you go right now outside and run a marathon? Most people are in tune enough with their body and their sense of shape to say that no, they couldn't do that. But if you ask them, oh, could you be a chess grandmaster in a year? Because that's a purely mental exercise, or so they imagine. They have this kind of this pride about their brains that they don't have about their body, where they would be more realistic and say that I have challenges and I'm not capable of running a marathon this afternoon. And they'll tell themselves, oh, I could be a chess grandmaster in a year, when that's also as absurd. So the concepts, is the approach right? So in an RTS, this can mean, is your build order correct for this matchup? Is this build order correct for this map? It can mean in a hero shooter, how big is your hero pool? Maybe the metagame is not conducive to playing hit scan right now in Overwatch for various reasons. So do you have something, if you're playing DPS, that is not hit scan? If there is a known metagame where certain things are at the top tier, is your character very bad against those top tiers? One of the worst decisions I ever made in Magic the Gathering from a competition standpoint is I went to a 2K for Modern, and I played a creature combo deck in Modern during the time that Death's Shadow was the #1 deck in the format, which is just a deck that has nothing but a million ways to remove creatures. Now, I ended up doing really well. I got top 8 in that event. My point, however, is that that is a bad concept. That is a bad way of approaching the game. The reason you want to think about these concepts is that it's going to inform your win condition. And it's not the win conditions of the team. I do believe when you play PvP games and you have a team and they're thrown together and you're up against another team that's thrown together, it might not be possible to win every single game. Some people on your team might actually be that bad and might be throwing that much. Your opponent might actually be a smurf of a much higher level than you, and it's not reasonable for your current skill level to overcome that difference. So it's not going to inform whether or not you win right now, but it's going to inform your role. What are you trying to do? What are you attempting to do? So if you play top lane in League of Legends and you play Yorick, then Yorick or a Dr. Mundo, they're really good at split pushing. If you take them and you don't ever push towers on side lanes, you just go to team fights all of the time, then that's a bad concept. You don't understand your individual role. This is also important in a game like Archeron. Let's take 3v3 arenas. This is something Swanafire and I were talking about. What is your team and your Eternals and your items relative to the other team Eternals and items? What is that team trying to do? It's that old idea that if you know what your opponent is trying to, if you know what you're doing, you won't lose. If you know what your opponent is doing, you won't be beaten. Right? So the fix to all of this, if you think you have a bad concept, is just watch tape. This is the term from basketball where they just watch their mark, they watch their man, they watch the defense, they watch how the rotation happens on a play, right? They watch how, if you're playing basketball, if you're playing pickup basketball and you're a really tall guy and you're always in the post, you're getting beat out by someone who's smaller than you, then what are you doing? Are you not in position properly? Are your hips not low enough so that you can jump up? Are you not grabbing with two hands? You're just knocking it aside like a hooligan with one hand, right? This same idea applies to games as well. If you just watch what you're doing in these replays, you will unconsciously, you cannot help but notice the flaws in what your game is going to be on a conceptual level. This matters because let's say you are a one trick in Archeron or in League of Legends. You play the same hero, same Eternal, only play that one all of the time, and there's a metagame shift, and maybe that Eternal isn't very good right now. So you need to know, oh, okay, wait a second, my Eternal's really good in these circumstances, they're pretty bad in these circumstances. A good example is on my tier list. Vatan is number 4 in Archeron out of the 3v3 arena's Eternal only power rankings. He's number 4, but he's number 4 predicated on being very good at destroying melee matchups. So if you're up against a team that is something like a Grim, a Kariv, and a Hollow, then the fact that you have pretty poor ranged ability is going to inform this concept that yes, you have a high tier placement Eternal, maybe they're going to struggle against these specific matchups. You can't just take the number and the learning and a vacuum. You have to start adding wrinkles and shades to it, right? This is the idea that people have once they become advanced or expert level players. Mechanics. This is the thing. Most people, what's great is in an RTS game, most people understand that their mechanics are bad once they get to a certain skill level. What do I mean by mechanics? It means just there's Did you press buttons? Were you accurate at pressing them? So in a real-time strategy game, did you make workers? Did you forget to make workers? Did you make supply buildings? Well, if you're in Tooth and Tail, did you scout the map appropriately, right? If you're playing an FPS, did you hit your shots? Were you accurate? It's not a question of whether the target selection was good. That's a concept question. The mechanics question is, oh no, you tried to aim at this person and you didn't hit them. You tried to headshot them and you didn't hit them, right? Oh, you tried to use this gun. You're not very well practiced on this gun. So you're not actually hitting a good recoil pattern in a game like Counter-Strike, right? These are what mechanics mean. In League of Legends, it's did you CS properly with your abilities? How did you CS well under tower? Most people can CS if they're just in a lane and it's practice tool, but if they let the wave bounce back into them and things go under the tower, they still don't know how many hits their character needs for the tower to hit, so they can clean up melees and so that they can clean up others such as ranged or even cannon minions, which is a big and important part of the economic portion of that game. So people will lie to themselves and say that their mechanics are a lot better than they are until they watch them. I promise you, if you think your mechanics are really good, top tier, no one can fuck with you on this. I know people who are extremely skilled in their various games. They are the equivalent of an Eternity, a Grandmaster, like over 2400 MMR, depending on the game, depending on what the ranking system looks like. And they tell themselves that they have bad mechanics in certain areas that a random to use the Blizzard system, a random platinum player would never say that they're actually bad at it. And a random silver player who's just starting these concepts would begin to understand that they're really bad about this. If you've not seen it, something that was very influential on my life in the RTS games was Filter SC's Bronze to Master series. And Filter SC's Bronze to Master series just talks about the importance of making sure you hit a benchmark. This is how you fix mechanical issues, right? It's not about do you have the right stuff? That's a concept question. It's a build order question. But in Filter's work, in his space for StarCraft 2, he asked the question, do you have enough workers? Do you have your upgrades on time? How big is your supply? If I tell you to have 101 supply and you walk across the map with 85 supply in an RTS, that's not going to fly because you could smash people if you were just better at the PvE self-imposed speedrun portion of an RTS game, your build order, right? If you were just to do that until it was boring. I know people who hit low Grandmasters because they just execute their build order while they watch a probe move around a pylon, and they just don't look at their base as much as possible. And by the time they got bored of that and it was something that they could do trivially, they just started laddering and they hit low GM. And you could hit that as well if you care about your mechanics, right? If you care about that IMLS idea of you should just aim for 10 CS a minute or 9 CS a minute, character dependent, right? In League of Legends, that old idea. These are things that you can do if you just focus on mechanics, because most people have terrible mechanics. They don't have good mechanics. They miss shots. There's another thing you can do for mechanics, which is this is where most people, that advice you're given of just play more, does help more people, because a lot of things that a new or an intermediate even player will do that are, a new or a novice player, some intermediate players will do that's pretty bad, comes from the fact that they don't want to, in a League of Legends game or a hero shooter, they don't want to lower their champion pool so they can have more consistency and more excellence on hitting basic fundamental shots and practicing their abilities and hitting them at good thresholds and comboing them together. In Archeron, they want to play arenas, but they want to play this character for 2 goes, and then they want to play this shattered build that they do for another 3 goes, and then that's not working, and so they're going to play this other Eternal for 5 goes, and they're going to swap between which Eternal they're playing on a daily basis and not really nail any of them down and just see which ones they like and they have fun with. And that's fine if fun is your goal, if just getting in there and pressing the buttons is your goal. But if improvement is your goal, if competition is your goal, then maybe you have to be hard on yourself for a little while and limit what your focus is so that you can get this mechanical consistency. And if you have mechanical consistency in almost any game, you will destroy people who don't have that mechanical consistency. Even, by the way, you can think of mechanical consistency of something like a build order in StarCraft applies to something like chess as well. There are many people, like Tyler 1's a great example. Tyler 1 in 1 year went up to 2,000 ELO because he just did essentially the same build every single time. And you say, oh, that's not mechanics, that's concepting. Well, he accepted the concept of, I'm going to try this one thing, and this is a good system, this is a good baseline with which to operate on, and then he just grinded the mechanics of that build order. We don't think of it that way in chess, but he just played it over and over and over and over. And when you practice this much, you find out where you have outplay potential. You can get extra value out of your mechanics in a way that other people can't. You're better on average with your characters, Eternals, whatever you want to call them, mechanically than other people that you're against. And if you're at a novice or intermediate level, you will smash people just on this basis. Just as a quick aside, I got low masters by doing a terrible build order where I just built Marines in a non-cheesy fashion as Terran, and I didn't even get gas, and I just mowed my way through Diamond without doing any kind of all-in, just by doing that in StarCraft 2 in like 2024. So this is the benefit you can get from just playing with mechanics, just playing with mechanical skill. So the last thing we're going to talk about, and yeah, you can fix this by benchmarking. This is the filter StarCraft idea, right? This is the idea that a lot of games have, such as CS per 10 minutes, damage per second. And if you play a lot of, let's say that you're really interested in WoW and you want to play the PvE content, but you're a DPS player and you need to get your numbers up relative to other people. If you keep playing that class instead of rotating to other tunes, you can see what your DPS should be for your build, and then you can see how well you end up getting by just practicing that. And you don't have to do anything special for benchmarking. People will say this is boring, but those people don't want to improve. I'm not talking to them, I'm talking to you because you're still here watching this. If you want to benchmark, go play versus the CPU. Go into a training mode. Go into a custom map where there's no opponent. You might be doing this for hours, but you should absolutely do this. By the way, a good example of this that I heard about from Counter-Strike was the team Astralis. Apparently, this team Astralis played something like 3 or 4 hours of their warm-ups, and then they played 3 to 4 hours of customs and scrimmages, and you would think, wow, they were just such a great team. How did they do it if they were only playing for 3 to 4 hours? And what I heard watching other content creators is actually Astralis got so good because they theory crafted and made sure they had the right concept in addition to practicing exclusively and focusing on their mechanical skill. And I want to say that practicing mechanics as a final note, it's not as simple as I'm just going to play a lot of time. I play a lot of time specifically trying to curb this area. I specifically want to have this many SCVs by 10 minutes. I specifically want to hit this CS. I specifically want to grind in the Overwatch training room in Vaxta or some of those other training maps until I hit over 40% with over a 15% crit rate. And it doesn't matter if that takes me 3 hours to do the warm-up and I can't play any games for the day. This will make you better if you just practice it. The final thing is mentality. This is actually the thing. Once upon a time, mechanics used to be the thing I think everyone was worst at. I think in the modern age, everyone's mentality is the thing that's gone completely to shit. Is this good practice? Is the first thing you should focus on. If you have a character pool, let's take Archeron. If you're like me, and let's say that you like playing Kariv, and you like playing Kariv and Subo, and you're Grimwald, and you go and you play like 5 games of Dala, is that good practice? Maybe to let the barest fundament of what Dala is, but that's not good practice in terms of elevating yourself. You're not going to get a lot of depth out of the concepts. You're not going to put a lot of time into the mechanical skill. And so again, if you're playing for fun, if you're just playing to have a lark, then yeah, go for it, have fun, don't worry about improving and just play the game. But that wouldn't be good practice for me, would it? To just play 5 games of Dala and then fuck off to playing something else and rotating constantly. This is the difference between I was just talking about grinding versus intention. So if you just say, I'm going to practice this same build order against opponents, I'm going to do that for 10 hours today, but you get really sloppy and you're doing things like, let's say, you're like me, you're a streamer and you're talking to chat, or let's say your goal is practice, you're focusing on practice, but you don't ever want to play repeated customs with people, or you just quit the game once you lose it and you don't want to come back, and you don't have consistency and put in the hours and the time, or you don't want to play when you're getting your head panned in, you have a 20% win rate against people who you think are bad and they're still stomping you and you're trying to be better than them. you don't want to play against them and get better because you are stuck in your feelings about how that sucks and you want to be better, but you don't want to put in the time or the effort or face the reality that you're not at that level yet. This is the idea of grinding versus intentionality. You have to be intentional with your replay analysis because replay analysis is practice. Image work is practice. This is going to be a thing that I talk about at some other point, but here's some other things. What are your tendencies in fight or flight or flee, fight, flight, freeze scenarios? What is your natural tendency? What is the consequence of how you were born and your environment and you grew up and whatever the piece of you is that isn't tabula rasa that you came pre-equipped with, right? What is your tendency when you go into these games? Are you someone who finds themselves shirking away from conflict? Then in a game like Arc Run, you might be missing damage. Are you someone who is always about fighting and going ham? Well, you might throw winning advantages. If you're someone like who's playing a top laner in League of Legends, and you always want to fight and go ham, you might just end the entire game by throwing yourself into the windmill if you're 3-0-2 and you just get a shutdown to like the enemy top laner, the enemy AD carry, right? What if you freeze? What if you don't know what to do? The most commonly people who freeze do it because they're not empowered, so they don't know what they can do in that moment, and they feel like it's either cowardice or it's just not possible for them to leave in that instance. You should know by looking at your replays what your tendencies are. This is almost a look into your own psychology, which means what's great about replay analysis is you can kind of fix what your flaws are in the game and then work on yourself as a person. This is one of the big reasons, by the way, that you find so many people who play PvP games and are hard asses and they work extremely hard and they're very good. And then when they're done playing the game, they go on and do something else with their life and they're highly successful because this kind of process will destroy any barriers you put up to your own self-improvement. Any lies that you tell yourself, the facade of what you think you are will fall away as you find out what do you actually do in those scenarios. What do you tend towards? Do you have to have more courage if you're a flee person? Do you need more knowledge if you're a freeze person, right? Do you need to be a bit tempered and measured and not always talk with your fists if you're a fight person? Next thing is focus level. I heard this from day 9 years ago, and I think it's absolutely true. Focus is a muscle. It's something that you work on, you build up. You don't natively have it. You don't natively start with a reserve of it. People who have more of it may have benefited from some circumstances, but they overall worked on that. And so if you're winning, are you just tired? Are you just bored? Are you just checked out? Like, oh yeah, okay, we're just going to win. It's like a 3v1. There's nothing they can do here. We're up 5,000 gold in League of Legends. We've wiped them the last several times their ultimates came down in Overwatch. And then you start facing some resistance because you're giving the enemy space and respect that you weren't before. But now that you're being kind of a bit relaxed and giving into that and just saying whatever, it's already over. No, it's not over until in baseball you step on the home plate, right? It doesn't matter if you hit an amazing triple. If you get to home plate and the catcher attacks you before you touch it, you're still out, right? You can't just pace through it, right? You have to finish off the sprint strong, playing to your outs. So are you thinking about how you can win? This is part concept and part mentality, because if you have the concept in mind, you should be aggressively playing towards that as part of mentality, because that's almost decision making. That's not mechanics. So if you know, oh, the enemy team in whatever game we're playing, let's say we're playing Tooth and Tail, right? Oh, my style is to play more macro and like search the map and get fast expansions over my opponent. But my opponent has a lot of units that are very good at harassing multiple locations, but terrible in a frontal engagement. Am I willing in this replay to recognize what their build is versus my build and say, I'm going to sacrifice what I like to do in favor of playing to the out of just having a big army that's maybe more stable and maybe less fun for me, but will ensure that I win specifically against what they're doing? Because otherwise you're just at the pure mercy of whatever the RNG was of another person's life and their experiences as it mashes into yours. And then, yeah, if you've got a lot of mechanics and you have a good mentality for the game, then maybe you win most of those. But if you have a bad mentality, maybe you're a mechanical monster, but you just can't get through the finish line. And then the final thing we'll talk about is versus differing player levels. Okay, again, are you willing to find practice when you are playing against people that you know you'll win 80% of the time against? Are you willing to try hard against them, even though there may be no way that they could beat you in an even scenario and would have to line up all of the stars would have to align in a row on some Hercules shit in order for them to beat you? Well, they're more likely to beat you if you don't pay attention. And also, they might be getting better. In fact, it's the nature of practice generally that the very top level of any competitive discipline increases its skill level slowly, gradually, because there's no one above who is coaching. There's no one above who is a higher skill player that you can watch their replays and learn from their insights and their analysis and get it secondhand. So everyone is just pushing the roof up slightly, 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 slightly. And a person who's down here who only has a 20% win rate against you now that you're fucking around against, they're improving in heavy steps because there's this much space between them and between you and the ceiling is only this much space. So they have more space to grow than you do. And if you're playing with them and they're practicing seriously and you're not, then you're going to catch up. This is how year on year in different games, different pros come up from an academy system or a school system, or they come up from in any game, in any discipline, any sport. You've never heard of them, but they just put on a massive grind and they were willing to do the techniques that you weren't willing to do. And they were willing to put in the effort that you weren't willing to put in. And even though you put in effort, they put more in of the better effort. And caring about fighting them seriously is important. Also, it's the other way around. If you're fighting someone you only have a 20% chance of beating, maybe the enemy team is like an Archeron, a full 3-stack of people who have competitive goals and mindset. And you're playing with a mixed bag of people, right? Yes, you do have an excuse when you lose against those people, but let's say you're playing Ascension. Did you have all your consumables? Did everyone have an item? Did everyone actually have a decent item? I'm not saying you run around with Hollow Amulet when you could have bought Invulnerable Amulet and you don't have a set bonus. Does everyone have an anchor ability? Are you positioned properly around a beacon? Right? Where were you outplayed? What did you do wrong? Because strong players, David Sterling said this decades ago, strong players are excellent at smelling weakness and crushing it, but they're also excellent at hiding their own weakness. So who stepped out of position? Who did something that they shouldn't have done? How many resources were expended to save someone who made what in theory is a minor mistake, ended up having major repercussions? Right? If you're playing in League of Legends or some other MOBA and you're laning against somebody and they're better than you, why are they better than you? What are they doing? Because they're not going to give the secrets of what they're doing away to you unless they're on voice call and they're particularly amiable. Right? You have to figure out what you do that did work and where did you stand that was safe and what did you do that made it so that they did have to give you some respect. Like, you can't just be in a boxing ring getting punched constantly and then never throw out a jab to the other guy, because you got to keep them humble. You got to make sure that they know that you're in this fight too. You're not just a punching bag to get teed off on. Right? And then how do you do that? How do you shade that in? How do you turn that 20% chance of beating them into a 30% chance of beating them, right? How do you make yourself a more powerful and robust practice partner? This is about practice partners and everything else and improvement, but really, again, it's about replays. What did you do that was the critical mistake? What did you do that caused the gameplay collapse? If you watch a replay, then you will learn what that is, and you will do it less often. I can't tell you how many times in Archeron I've been playing for 4+ hours in arenas, and at the first hour, I have like a 5% win rate with my team. We're playing terribly. We don't have any synergy between each other. Maybe some of us are on new Eternals. We're playing against people whose raw skill level, hours in the game is better. They've been playing for a year. We've only been playing for like a couple months at best, right? We haven't leveraged our various skills. And then slowly, after playing a lot more and thinking about what they're doing and then watching what I did wrong and dying, then we just play it better and better and better. And then, yeah, but it never gets, this isn't a manga. It doesn't get to 50%, right? Where it's just even and now we're just like 1-to-1 with them. But, you turn this 5% snowball collapse into like a 30%, a 35%, a 40% chance of victory. This is all the things that you can do with replay analysis. Now, if yapped long enough, so we'll just get to the last bit here, which is, if this is so good, if it's like the best way to improve and it's the highest density way and it's the most valuable practice and it gets you in your mentality and improves your psychology and it gives you a broader understanding of the game, then why don't people do that? I mean, I've written a bunch of stuff here, but the number one reason is it's hard. it's challenging. It requires you to stretch beyond what you currently are, right? You are a little tree right now, requires you to like have new branches that get spread out where they have not been before. You have to grow as a person in order to look at yourself and see your flaws and then be willing to change, but that requires and is predicated on you accepting that there were flaws that needed changing in the first place. Also, it takes a lot of mental focus to do this, and you might not have, and remember, focus is a muscle. I agree with that, absolutely. You might not have a lot of focus at first. You might only be able to do replay analysis for like 15 minutes before you're like, okay, that's done. And that will sound ridiculous, but if you've never done replay analysis, then you will find out that that is reality. The only reason I was able on stream to go do this for 6.5 hours with barely a break is that, unbeknownst to most people here, I have another YouTube channel where I just did hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of replay reviews. I've casted probably dozens of tournaments where I am casting while I'm also thinking about what the games are. I've seen and done private coaching with other people in multiple games before. It is very, very hard to start stretching this muscle of focus. So, but again, why don't people do this? Why don't they just say, I don't have a lot of focus now. Maybe it's the screens that zap my brain, or I never worked on that before. I'm going to start doing this replay analysis. I'm going to get better. So here's the first one. People lie to themselves. Remember what I said about how you would never tell yourself that I can go run a marathon right now, but you might lie to yourself and say that you could be a chess grandmaster in a year. That is the brain body limit. There is something about how people are so removed, at least in my country and in this part of the Western world, are so removed from the reality of their physical, they're so removed from the reality of their physical bodies that they can start accepting that there are limits that they have there. But most people don't challenge themselves enough mentally. They don't do something and fail hard enough to realize that, no, they are not actually the smartest person who ever lived, who is capable of learning an entire language in 1 week of reading a guidebook while they're going on vacation, right? They genuinely believe that they have the pride that their ego will not allow them to be stupid, or to say that there are limits to whatever intelligence is, or whatever the ability to learn is. The next thing is the path from noob to novice. If you are a noob player, and OOB just won't get anything out of this, so I'll assume any WB, as in you are a newbie, you are just new around, right? You have so many facts you have to learn about a game. Once you get to a level where you have some level of comfort with those basic facts of, oh, I didn't know I could build this unit. Oh, I didn't know that that's what this character did. And now you're about a novice level. The thing is that new players, noobs, get attracted to a game because of the box art of the game. They turn to the back. I mean, no one knows what box art is anymore because we live in a digital age, but I was old enough to remember when you could go buy games, the digital, like physical media, not digital, and you would turn the box around and it would show you the fantasy of what a game is. Now, most new players are attracted to a game because of the fantasy of what the game is. And because they have this concept that their brains are massive, even though they have no reason to think that. They've never failed enough to concern themselves with that. They think, oh, well, if my brain is big and I pick up this game, then I'll just be the best, and that's that easy. Now, when you go from being a noob player to a novice in any field, you have a sudden transition. You go from thinking about the box art to thinking about the mechanics of the game. Now, this is a good thing because it puts you more under the ground base level of what the game is, how you interact with it, how you have power over it, how you get stronger within it. But the problem is that if you're going to become an intermediate player, you could almost overindulge on mechanics or over-worship mechanics, because you can have a terrible build, as we said, you can have a terrible concept, and then have good mechanics, and then their good mechanics are carrying a terrible strategy, and you'll plateau, but you don't see the danger that you will plateau, because you won't plateau here. You'll plateau at some later point. And so people don't look at replays, because if they did, they would then have to come away from this, because they feel like they've gone from being a noob to being an expert, because they understand that there's the value of mechanics, but they don't understand that experts understand that mechanics are the fundament on which you build the game, that then you get to attack other people with, you get to engage in the PvP with, you get to enjoy the competition aspect of these improvements, you get to learn more about how also you improve your own game beyond the mechanics. You talk about, is this the proper concept? Is this the proper decision making? Is this the proper application of my mechanics? Do I have mechanical skill in a sport, let's say tennis? I'm really good at dashing, but I'm playing from the baseline. right? This doesn't make any sense. There's an incongruity here. And so when you go from this path to intermediate to advanced, you had to shift all of your understanding from it's not the box art, it's not just mechanics, it's the mechanics as applied on a conceptual level. And frankly, the reason that you don't see most people talking about this and most people don't do this is for two reasons. One, there's a lot of free material available to new players because new players in most games, especially in PvP disciplines where there's a drive by competition to improve and to succeed and to better yourself for the purpose of bettering yourself relative to other people, there's a lot of new player friendly content. There's a lot of bronze to grandmaster. There's a lot of top 10 tips for new players. There's a lot of these 5 add-ons you need in World of Warcraft. Well, maybe not anymore, but you get the idea, right? The difference is that when you're going to at this intermediate level to this advanced level, there's not so much that you can find that is specific to you, your circumstance, your needs. You might see some public coaching, and you might find some courses that give that information. You might find isolated posts or Discord servers that you can hide within that will give you this information. But notice that all of those are secluded areas because as you walk the path of improving on anything, you are climbing up a mountain, and the mountain not only gets more rigorous and has a steeper incline the more you travel, but there are fewer people that are sharing the climb with you. It's not a tourist climb for so many people. Yeah, maybe once Everest was a thing that took the human ingenuity and spirit to accomplish. Now many people have almost guided tours of how to get up to Mount Everest. And so if you're trying to get up a mountain that other people have not before, which by definition you are when you are improving yourself, you are the person climbing the mountain of you, then replays are a fantastic way to go about and do that. And don't be surprised when you have to get more and more refined skills from people, from external sources that start charging higher and higher valuations of money. So if you start learning how to record your own gameplay and get these replays, then you'll understand more about what you can do for yourself, and you won't be led astray by false wisdom.